Welcome to the Universal Design for Learning online implementation pathway. I'm Bill Wilmot, an implementation specialist at CAST, and very excited to be working with many of you in New Hampshire to think about the next phases of UDL implementation. UDL implementation requires shifting mindset, the language, practices, beliefs, and framing of educators, parents, and learners. As one New Hampshire teacher said, everyone is looking for a checklist of the right way to do something. Instead, UDL is a mindset in which to plan, structure, and think about how to help kids be successful. No problem, right? In this way, it is both more complex and more transformational than something like the implementation of a new math, reading, or science program. Consequently, implementation of UDL is not an overnight process. And for it to really take hold, your team will need to carefully consider all aspects of your school, from teaching and learning to school culture and environment to professional learning and leadership and management. This online pathway will lead your team through a school-wide implementation planning process. Your team will become the school's lead UDL team, supporting and engaging others in the process of planning for UDL implementation. At the end of this pathway, and with significant additional work, you will walk away with a multi-year implementation plan, key knowledge about the phases of implementation, a clearer picture of what school-wide implementation means and could look like, and a unifying vision for your school. If you choose this path, you will join a handful of innovators on the front lines of showing what is possible when you use the UDL framework to increase accessibility and rigor and embrace learner agency in the design of classrooms, curriculum, and schools. To launch any successful implementation effort, it's important to identify a clear need that you're responding to. For us, this is answering the question, why UDL? This step guides all future work and builds a critical sense of purpose and even urgency. Change is hard and only has enough fuel to move forward if this sense of purpose is clearly defined. Your answer to why UDL is the giant boulder that you will toss into the middle of the pond of your school to start the ripples of change. Returning again and again to the answer to this question propels the work forward. Schools have embraced UDL for reasons ranging from increasing student engagement to unifying educators' instructional approaches and language, to creating a framework to tie all of their initiatives together, to making inclusive classrooms really work for everyone, to bringing general and special education teachers together, to improving learning outcomes for all learners. What we've found for New Hampshire teachers so far is an overwhelming feeling of freedom and excitement among these educators and the opportunity to finally do what feels like the right thing for kids. As one teacher said, I feel so much more comfortable within my classroom. This module will help your team lead a discussion among your faculty to answer the question, why UDL? I will outline 3 steps today. Step 1, introducing the core purposes of UDL to your colleagues. Step 2, articulating strategic instructional goals. And step 3, guiding your colleagues through a why UDL conversation to bring together step 1 and step 2. In order to participate fully in this conversation, your colleagues in school will need some basic information about the goals and purposes of UDL. It will be up to you to provide this context. Think about the aspects of your own UDL learning that have been most meaningful and inspired you to continue deeper. Is it the idea of expert learning as the goal? Is it the idea of a common language among all educators? Is it embracing your role as designers of learning experiences? Is it the goal of making learning experiences more accessible by removing barriers to clear learning goals? Is it the idea that variability is the norm? Or is it the idea that the principles of multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression are derived from the affective, recognition, and strategic brain networks? Or perhaps there's another core UDL purpose that has really had an impact on your thinking? If you have not already, the first step is to find a way to share these ideas with your colleagues, to see where they see the greatest opportunity for their own practice. They can't answer the question, why UDL, if they don't know enough about it. The next step is to identify strategic instructional goals. Where do you want to see change in student or adult learning? For whom? How will you measure this change? If you've already defined strategic instructional goals in a school improvement plan, then you're halfway there. For example, if you know that you want to focus your efforts on developing deeper reading comprehension in grades 2 through 5 as measured by the DRA reading assessment, then UDL simply becomes a tool to help you achieve this at the highest level and for more learners. If you haven't defined goals yet, then taking some time with a team from across the school, or better yet, with a data team you already have in place to gather data to inform these instructional goals is crucial. By data, I mean not only standardized test data, but also regular and organized observations from classrooms as well. These could come in the form of teacher report, instructional rounds, looking at student work, and walkthroughs. You might also urge your colleagues to think across all aspects of the school, even beyond teaching and learning, to professional learning, to school culture and environment, including the community, and leadership and management. Are there ways to bring UDL to the learning that happens in each of those domains as well? Finally, we're ready for the Why UDL meeting itself. Bring together step 1, the most compelling core purposes of UDL, and step 2, strategic instructional goals. Think about how you might frame this meeting. How would you finish the sentence, UDL can help us blank by blank? You might have your own small version of this Why UDL conversation as a team before you lead this with the whole faculty. If your team sees the ideas of using UDL to reach more learners as most important, then you can bring that to your instructional goals. UDL can help us develop deeper reading comprehension skills by representing texts in multiple ways. How do you want to use the power of UDL? By creating these statements, you're creating a theory of action for your implementation of UDL. If we do X, we expect to see improvement in Y area of student learning. Each instructional goal might call for a different use of UDL, some focused on engagement, some on options for expression and communication. Like any tool, UDL does not have an end in itself, but is only used to support other goals. The hammer does not hold together wood, but working with a nail, it's incredibly powerful in accomplishing just that. Notice that having a clear statement like this brings incredible focus to your application and learning of UDL. Now, we are not just searching the guidelines for ways to make learning more flexible and accessible. We are going on a targeted hunt for a very specific purpose, with very specific learning goals in mind. The answer to this question, why UDL, is the rock that you will throw into the pond of your school. The more focused and clear the answers, the bigger the impact and the greater the change that will ripple out. One note on structures like data teams, regular observations, and professional learning communities. These structures are essential prerequisites to successful implementation of any new practice. With the right structures in place, some research shows that implementation of a new practice is successfully implemented 80% of the time after 3 years. Without these structures, successful implementation happens 14% of the time, on average after 17 years. See the linked video from Karen Blaze and Dean Fixon for more on this. In the resources for this module, you will find a process that can guide this series of meetings. Please feel free to adapt these materials to meet your needs. I suggest you try out this process first among your team to see where it takes you. Then plan for and engage a full faculty meeting or whatever other structure you have to support this work. Finally, you might even consider going through a similar process with your parents or students to engage all constituencies and gather important feedback. Good luck with this first and most important step supports school-wide UDL implementation.